London, 1848. Miss Zephyra Redding stood alone at her bedroom window, watching raindrops trace crooked paths down the glass pane. Her reflection stared back at her, a young woman of 22, with dark hair swept severely into a simple chignon, wearing a grey dress as plain as her prospects. £3, 17 shillings, she whispered, counting the meagre contents of her reticule once more. 6 years as a governess, and this was all she had to show for it. The letter lay open on her small writing desk, the elegant handwriting of her former employer, Lady Huxley, a mockery of its cruel contents. Miss Redding, it pains me to inform you that your services will no longer be required. While your academic instruction has been satisfactory, the disturbing rumors regarding your father's disgrace have reached even our countryside retreat. I cannot, in good conscience, allow a person of such questionable heritage to shape the moral character of my daughters. Zephyra's fingers curled around the letter, crumpling its edges. She had been a fool to believe that 6 years of dedicated service would matter once society discovered who she truly was. A convicted forger's daughter. A disgrace by association. Her carefully constructed facade of respectability had crumbled with a single whisper. I shall not weep, she told her reflection firmly. Tears change nothing. She had learned that lesson at 16, when bailiffs dragged her father away and auctioned their home in front of jeering neighbors. When her mother died of grief 3 months later. When the whispers followed her through London's streets, forger's daughter, tainted blood, untrustworthy stock. No family would hire a governess with such connections, not once they discovered the truth. And now, with her meagre savings nearly depleted and no character reference forthcoming from Lady Huxley, Zephyra faced the stark reality of her situation. In a fortnight, she would be penniless. The morning paper lay on her desk, open to the employment advertisements. She had circled several possibilities in hopeful black ink before Lady Huxley's letter arrived. Now they seemed to mock her with their impossibility. Except one. A peculiar advertisement she had initially dismissed, companion sought for gentlemen of noble birth residing at Thornfield Hall, Cumberland. Applicants must be educated, unmarried, between 20 to 25 years, and willing to accept unusual terms of employment. Inquire at offices of E. Claiborne, Lincoln's Inn Fields. Unusual terms. Zephyra's lips thinned. She knew what such euphemisms often concealed. Yet desperation has a way of reframing moral questions that once seemed absolute. Better an arrangement with one man than destitution on the streets, she whispered to the room, hating the pragmatism that had replaced her youthful idealism. At least I might retain some agency in my fall. The rain intensified, drumming against the glass, as Zephyra made her decision. Whatever indecent proposition awaited her at Lincoln's Inn Fields, it could hardly be worse than starvation. Love was a luxury reserved for those with fortune and family connections, neither of which she possessed. Tomorrow she would meet this Mr. Claiborne and discover just how far she was willing to fall. The offices of E. Claiborne occupied the second floor of a respectable building in Lincoln's Inn Fields. Zephyra smoothed her best dress, navy blue wool, 3 years old but still presentable, and tugged nervously at her gloves as a clerk led her to a private office. The man who rose to greet her was not what she had expected. Mr. Edward Claiborne was perhaps 40, with silver threading his dark hair at the temples, impeccably dressed in a manner that spoke of wealth but not ostentation. His eyes, however, betrayed nothing of his character, cool, assessing, like a banker valuing collateral. Miss Redding, he said, gesturing to a chair. I appreciate your prompt response to the advertisement. I confess myself intrigued by its unusual wording, Mr. Claiborne. Direct as well. Excellent. He sat behind his desk, steepling his fingers. Before we proceed, I must ask, What circumstances bring a young woman of obvious education to answer such a vaguely worded notice? Zephyra hesitated. The truth would end this interview immediately. Yet lies had short lives and painful deaths. My circumstances are reduced, sir. My last position as governess ended, unexpectedly. Due to your father's conviction for forgery and your subsequent social disgrace, I presume. The blood drained from Zephyra's face. You know who I am. I make it my business to know everything about potential candidates for this position, Miss Redding. Including that you have lived an exemplary life despite circumstances that would have broken many women of stronger initial advantage. She sat rigidly, hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. Then I imagine our business is concluded. On the contrary. Claiborne pulled a document from his desk drawer. Your circumstances make you ideally suited to my client's needs. And what precisely are those needs, Mr. Claiborne? Your advertisement was deliberately vague. My client is Edward Chambers, the Duke of Halewood. Zephyra blinked in surprise. The Duke of Halewood was rarely mentioned in society pages, but his name was well known. One of England's wealthiest peers, he had retreated from society years ago after some tragedy. The Duke requires a wife. A startled laugh escaped her. Surely you jest, sir. A duke does not seek a convicted forger's daughter as his bride. The duke's requirements are specific. He needs a woman of intelligence and education, without family connections that would complicate matters. Someone desperate enough to accept unusual terms, yet principled enough to honor them. Claiborne's gaze was unwavering. He offers financial security, his protection, and his name. In exchange, you would provide companionship and eventually an heir. An arranged marriage, she said flatly. A business arrangement, he corrected. The Duke has no interest in society's approval. He seeks a practical solution to his situation. Which is? Claiborne's expression remained impassive. The Duke lost his sight in a hunting accident 7 years ago. He has lived in seclusion at Thornfield Hall since. His brother is pressing him to marry and produce an heir, lest the title pass to a distant cousin of questionable character. Zephyra's mind raced. A blind duke, a marriage of convenience. It sounded like something from a Gothic novel. Why not seek a bride from among the nobility? The Duke has no patience for society and its pretensions. He prefers someone who will approach this as a mutually beneficial arrangement rather than a love match. And what guarantee would I have of fair treatment? Claiborne pushed the document toward her. A marriage settlement most generous. £5,000 per annum for your personal use. A townhouse in London to be placed in your name. And should you produce an heir, an estate in Hampshire will become yours outright. The sums made Zephyra dizzy. It was more wealth than she could comprehend, enough to ensure she would never again know want. And if I refuse to perform certain duties? The Duke has made it clear that while he expects eventual heirs, he has no interest in forcing affections. The marriage would be consummated, but beyond that, physical relations would occur only by mutual consent. She stared at the contract, her heart pounding. This is absurd. A duke offering marriage to someone like me. Sometimes, Miss Redding, life's most unlikely circumstances present the greatest opportunities. The Duke needs a wife without connections who will not flinch from his condition. You need security and protection from society's condemnation. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. Complicated only by human emotion, which both you and the Duke seem refreshingly determined to set aside. He offered her a pen. Should you wish to proceed, sign the preliminary agreement. You will then travel to Thornfield Hall to meet the Duke. If either party wishes to withdraw after that meeting, you will receive £200 for your trouble. Zephyra's hand trembled as I am selling myself, she whispered. You are securing your future, Claiborne corrected gently. In a world that offers women precious few options to do so. She signed her name with a flourish that belied her inner turmoil. Whatever awaited her at Thornfield Hall, it offered escape from the grinding poverty that loomed before her. Love was a luxury she had long ago surrendered, security would have to suffice. Thornfield Hall emerged from the mist like something from a dream, a great stone mansion set against the wild Cumberland fells, its Gothic towers and turrets silhouetted against the grey autumn sky. The journey had taken 3 days, and as the carriage passed through imposing iron gates and wound up the long drive, Zephyra fought to calm her racing heart. A severe-looking housekeeper met her at the entrance. Miss Redding. I am Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper. His Grace is expecting you in the library. The house was magnificent yet somehow melancholy, with heavy draperies and sombre furnishings. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the corridors, their eyes seeming to follow her progress with silent judgment. The library doors were massive oak panels carved with intricate designs. Mrs. Porter knocked once before opening them. Miss Redding, Your Grace. Zephyra stepped into a vast room lined with books from floor to ceiling. A fire burned in a massive stone fireplace, and before it stood a tall figure, his back to the door. You may leave us, Mrs. Porter, said a voice that startled Zephyra with its richness and clarity. The Duke turned as the door closed. He was not what she had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, with strong features and dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, he appeared to be in his late 30s. His eyes, a startling pale blue, focused somewhere over her left shoulder. Despite his blindness, he carried himself with absolute confidence. Miss Redding. I trust your journey was comfortable. His voice held no warmth, merely polite inquiry. It was, Your Grace. Thank you. Please, be seated. He gestured toward chairs by the fire with unerring accuracy. You must think this situation quite irregular. I find that irregular circumstances often lead to the most practical solutions, Your Grace. A slight smile touched his lips. Indeed. Mr. Claiborne speaks highly of your pragmatism. It is a quality I value above most others. He moved to a chair opposite her, navigating the space with practiced ease. Zephyra noted how he used subtle cues, the heat of the fire, the change in sound as he passed furniture, to orient himself. I assume Mr. Claiborne explained the nature of our potential arrangement. He did, though I confess it remained somewhat bewildering that a man of your position would consider someone like me. The Duke's expression hardened. Someone like you? A woman of intelligence and education, without the pretensions of society ladies who would either pity or fear me. Mr. Claiborne investigated thoroughly before approaching you. You have lived honorably despite circumstances that would have broken many. My father's crimes are well known. Your father's crimes are his own. I care nothing for lineage or society's approval, Miss Redding. I seek a practical partnership with a woman who values security over sentiment and who will not shatter at the first harsh word or challenging circumstance. His directness was both refreshing and unsettling. And what of affection, Your Grace? Do you not wish for that in a marriage? Affection is unreliable and often fleeting. I prefer honest dealing between parties with aligned interests. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the arm of his chair. I will be plain, I need an heir. I need a woman who can manage my household and serve as my eyes in certain matters. In return, I offer financial security, my protection, and considerable freedom. Freedom. The word surprised her. I have no interest in controlling your activities or movements, so long as you conduct yourself with discretion and fulfill the basic terms of our agreement. You may travel, pursue interests, even maintain a separate household in London if you wish, once an heir is secured. The arrangement he described was cold, transactional, yet offered more autonomy than most marriages. And intimate matters? She forced herself to ask, heat rising in her cheeks. Will occur as necessary for procreation, and otherwise only by mutual desire. His expression remained impassive. I have no wish to impose myself where I am not welcomed. He rose suddenly, moving to the window with perfect confidence. You should know that I have not touched a woman since my accident. My blindness makes many uncomfortable. I will not subject you to unwelcome attentions. The admission surprised her with its vulnerability, at odds with his otherwise commanding presence. May I ask what caused your accident, Your Grace? His shoulders stiffened. A hunting accident. The details are unimportant. The abrupt tone signaled the subject closed. After a moment, he continued more evenly. You will have 3 days at Thornfield to consider my proposal. Explore the house and grounds. Ask questions of the staff if you wish. On the 4th morning, I will require your answer. Should you decline, Mr. Claiborne will arrange your return to London with the promised compensation. And if I accept, we would marry by special license within the week. No grand ceremony, no society witnesses. Simply a legal binding followed by the beginning of our arrangement. His practical approach to what should be life's most significant emotional commitment struck Zephyra as both liberating and profoundly sad. You have questions still, he said, somehow sensing her hesitation. Only one, Your Grace. Why marry at all? Surely a man of your means could secure companionship without legal entanglement. A bitter smile touched his lips. The entailment of the dukedom requires a legitimate heir. My brother Richard grows impatient for my failure to produce one. Should I die without issue, the title passes to him, and then to his son, a prospect I find intolerable for reasons I need not elaborate. He turned from the window, his sightless gaze somehow finding her with unnerving accuracy. I will leave you to settle in. Dinner is at 7. Mrs. Porter will show you to your rooms. As if on cue, the door opened and the housekeeper appeared. Before Zephyra could rise, the Duke spoke again. One final matter, Miss Redding. I value honesty above all else. Whatever else our arrangement entails, I will never lie to you. I expect the same courtesy in return. She rose, curtsying despite his inability to see it. Understood, Your Grace. Until dinner, then. As she followed Mrs. Porter through the labyrinthine corridors, Zephyra wondered what strange twist of fate had led her to this place, to a potential marriage devoid of love yet promising a security she had never known. The Duke offered a business arrangement where other women dreamed of romance. Perhaps it was better this way. Love had never brought her anything but disappointment. The 3 days allotted for her consideration passed in a strange limbo of luxury and uncertainty. Thornfield Hall was magnificent yet melancholy, like its master, Zephyra thought. The staff treated her with a cautious respect, clearly aware of her purpose but revealing nothing of their thoughts on the matter. Each evening she dined with the Duke in the vast formal dining room, their conversation intelligent but impersonal. He questioned her about her education, her experiences as a governess, her views on current events, yet revealed almost nothing of himself in return. On the 3rd evening, as they sat before the library fire after dinner, Zephyra finally gathered the courage to probe deeper. Tomorrow I must give you my answer, Your Grace, yet I feel I hardly know you at all. His expression remained impassive. What would you know? Something of the man I might marry, beyond his practical requirements. He was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. I was not always as you find me now, Miss Redding. Before my accident, I was different. How so? Arrogant. Careless. I took everything for granted, my sight, my position, my future. His fingers traced the arm of his chair. Blindness is an effective teacher of humility. And loneliness, it seems. His head turned sharply toward her voice. You presume much. I observe much, she corrected gently. This house has 40 rooms, yet you inhabit only a handful. Your staff speaks of you with respect but maintains a careful distance. You dine alone save for my presence these 3 days. A muscle worked in his jaw. My condition makes others uncomfortable. Does it make you uncomfortable, Your Grace? The question hung in the air between them. For a moment, she glimpsed something raw beneath his composure, a flash of vulnerability quickly masked. I have adapted, he said finally. That is not what I asked. His lips curved in what might have been a genuine smile. You are quite direct for someone in your position. I believe you value honesty above flattery, Your Grace. Edward. I beg your pardon. If you are to be my wife, you should use my given name. At least in private. The unexpected intimacy of this concession disconcerted her. Very well. Edward. His name felt strange on her tongue, a small breach in the formal distance between them. To answer your question, he continued, yes, my blindness made me uncomfortable. Furious, at first. Then despairing. Now, it simply is. I neither rage against it nor embrace it. It is my reality. The candor of his admission touched something in Zephyra. This was the first glimpse beneath the Duke's controlled facade. How did you adapt? She asked softly. Necessity. Pride. Stubbornness. His lips curved slightly. I refused to be pitied or coddled. I memorized my surroundings. I learned to use my other senses. I dismissed servants who could not overcome their discomfort. And isolated yourself in the process. He shrugged. Better isolation than false sympathy or, worse, the knowledge that others watch you struggle and feel elevated by your diminishment. Is that what you believe would happen? It is what did happen, before I removed myself from society. His voice hardened. I will not be a curiosity or an object of pity, Miss Redding. Zephyra, she said quietly. If I am to call you Edward. He inclined his head. Zephyra. An unusual name. My mother had romantic notions. Zephyra, from Zephyr, the west wind. It suits you. There is something refreshing about your directness. A comfortable silence fell between them. Zephyra studied him in the firelight, the strong profile, the hands that moved with such precision despite his blindness. What would it be like to be married to this man? To share his name, his home, eventually his bed? Have you decided? He asked suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. I believe I have, she replied. I will marry you, Edward. I accept your terms. He nodded once, his expression betraying nothing. Very well. I will send for the vicar tomorrow. Such a bloodless response to her acceptance might have offended another woman. Zephyra found it oddly reassuring. This was indeed a business arrangement, honest in its motivations, clear in its expectations. No false promises, no pretense of romantic feeling. I would request one amendment to our agreement, she said carefully. His eyebrows rose. Which is? That we approach one another with kindness, even as we acknowledge the practical nature of our union. Something flashed across his face, surprise, perhaps. Kindness. Yes. Not passion or devotion or even affection. Simply kindness. He considered this, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the chair arm. A reasonable request. Kindness it shall be. Later, as Zephyra prepared for bed in her luxurious guest chamber, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake or the most practical decision of her life. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew, entering a union devoid of love yet promising security she had never known. It is enough, she told herself firmly. Love was for women with the luxury of choice, not for disgraced governesses with empty purses and uncertain futures. They were married 3 days later in Thornfield Small Chapel, a simple ceremony with only the household staff as witnesses. Zephyra wore a pale blue silk dress purchased hastily from the local seamstress, her first new garment in years. The Duke was resplendent in formal attire, his bearing so confident one might forget his blindness until noticing how his valet subtly guided him with the lightest touch on his elbow. The vicar seemed perplexed by the hasty, private nature of the ceremony but was too awed by the Duke's position to question it. As Zephyra spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, she felt strangely calm. This was not the marriage she had dreamed of as a girl, but it offered protection from a world that had shown her little kindness. "You may kiss your bride," the vicar pronounced after the final blessing. For a moment, the Duke seemed uncertain. Then he reached out, his fingers finding her cheek with surprising gentleness. He bent forward, pressing his lips briefly to hers, a kiss formal and chaste, yet somehow disconcerting in its restraint. Afterward, there was a small reception in the drawing-room. The staff offered congratulations with varying degrees of warmth and curiosity. Zephyra noted how Mrs. Porter watched her with undisguised skepticism, while the Duke's valet, Mr. Collins, regarded his master with something like concern. That evening, Zephyra was escorted to the Duchess's chambers, a luxurious suite adjacent to the Duke's rooms, connected by a discreet door. Mrs. Porter showed her the elegant furnishings with barely concealed disapproval. These were the previous Duchess's rooms. Untouched these 15 years since her Grace's passing. Zephyra ran her fingers over the silk damask coverlet. The Duke's mother. His stepmother, Mrs. Porter corrected. His Grace's mother died in childbirth. The late Duke remarried when Master Edward was 10. The Duchess Amelia was very beautiful. Something in the housekeeper's tone suggested a story untold. Before Zephyra could inquire further, a knock sounded at the connecting door. "That will be His Grace," Mrs. Porter said. "I shall leave you now, Your Grace." The title sounded stiff on her lips as she addressed Zephyra. When the housekeeper departed, Zephyra called, "You may enter." Edward stepped into the room, still formally dressed but without his jacket. He had navigated his own chambers without assistance, but now he paused, disoriented in unfamiliar territory. "The room has been closed up for some time," he said. "I should have had it refreshed before your arrival." "It's beautiful," she assured him. "Though perhaps haunted by memories." He tensed. "What has Mrs. Porter told you?" "Only that these were your stepmother's rooms." "Nothing more." He relaxed slightly. "Mrs. Porter disapproves of our marriage. She has been with the family since I was a child and feels protective. She fears I married you for your fortune and position." A wry smile touched his lips. "Did you not?" "I married you for security," Zephyra corrected. "Had I wanted only fortune, I might have pursued less permanent arrangements with less honorable men." "A fair distinction." He moved carefully into the room, his hand finding the back of a chair. "I've come to discuss our arrangements for the night." Zephyra's heart quickened. I understand certain obligations are expected. Obligations, he repeated, the word sounding distasteful. I have no desire to claim marital rights from an unwilling partner. Yet an heir is required. It was part of our agreement. He nodded stiffly. In time. There is no immediate urgency. An awkward silence fell between them. Zephyra studied her husband, for he was that now, this man she barely knew. Despite his blindness, there was nothing physically repulsive about him. Indeed, he cut a commanding figure with his height and strong features. Yet the thought of intimacy with a virtual stranger sent a tremor of apprehension through her. "I have made you uncomfortable," he observed. "Forgive me." "Not uncomfortable," she corrected. "Merely uncertain." He turned as if to leave. "We need not resolve this tonight." "Wait," Zephyra said, surprising herself. "Perhaps we might talk a while? I find I know very little about my husband." He hesitated, then nodded. "What would you know? Tell me about your life before the accident." His expression closed. "There is little worth telling. I was a typical young nobleman, privileged, arrogant, careless of others' feelings. I doubt that entirely. You doubt my assessment of my own character. I doubt that any man who values honesty and directness as you do could ever have been entirely thoughtless." He was silent a moment. "You are generous in your estimation." "Not generous. Observant." She indicated a chair. "Please, sit. If we are to build even a practical partnership, we should know something of one another." After a moment's hesitation, he sat down. Zephyra took the chair opposite him, close enough to speak quietly yet maintaining a proper distance. "I was 29 when the accident occurred," he began. "I had spent the previous decade avoiding responsibility, enjoying the privileges of my position without acknowledging its duties. My father had died when I was 21, leaving me the title. I treated it as license for indulgence rather than service. What changed? Besides the obvious." His mouth twisted. "When one can no longer see the admiration or fear in others' eyes, one must find other reasons to value oneself. I discovered I had developed precious few." The raw honesty of his admission touched her. "And now?" "Now I manage my estates. I correspond with agricultural societies about innovations in farming methods. I support several charitable organizations anonymously." He shrugged. "I attempt to be useful, if not visible. These are worthy pursuits. They are adequate occupations." His fingers tapped restlessly against the chair arm. "And you? What dreams did Zephyra Redding harbor before circumstances forced her to accept a blind duke's practical proposal?" The question caught her off guard. "I had simple aspirations. To teach. Perhaps someday to open a small school for girls of modest means. To be secure. Not love? Marriage? Children?" She smiled sadly, though he couldn't see it. "Those dreams died with my father's disgrace. No respectable man would marry a forger's daughter once her background was discovered. Yet here you are, a duchess." "Through an arrangement that specifically excludes affection," she reminded him. "You married me precisely because I had no illusions about love." He was quiet a moment. "Do you resent it? This loveless bargain?" The question deserved honesty. "No. I resent a world that leaves women so few options that such arrangements become necessary. But I do not resent you, nor our agreement. You are remarkably forthright. You said you valued honesty. I see no point in pretense between us. He nodded slowly. Nor do I. He rose. It grows late. I should leave you to rest. And our arrangement for tonight. He hesitated. I would not press you. Perhaps in time, when we are less strangers to one another. Relief and something like disappointment mingled in her response. Thank you for your consideration. He moved toward the connecting door with his characteristic confidence, then paused. Good night, Zephyra. Good night, Edward. After he left, Zephyra sat alone in the opulent chamber, uncertain whether to feel relieved or rejected. She had married a man who treated her with courtesy but maintained an emotional distance as vast as the physical space he navigated with such care. It is enough, she told herself again, though the words rang hollow in the silence of her new home. The following weeks established a routine of polite coexistence. Edward spent mornings in his study attending to estate business, dictating letters to his secretary. Afternoons often found him walking the grounds with his valet or riding, an activity that astonished Zephyra until she observed how a specially trained horse responded to his commands without visual cues. For her part, Zephyra explored Thornfield, gradually assuming management of the household from a reluctant Mrs. Porter. She reviewed accounts, met with staff, and began small improvements to the somber interior. They dined together each evening, their conversations gradually evolving from formal exchanges to genuinely engaging discussions. Edward proved to be widely read and thoughtful, with strong opinions on politics, philosophy, and literature. Despite his isolation, he kept current with world events through newspapers and journals read to him by his secretary. One evening, 3 weeks after their wedding, Zephyra ventured a delicate question during dinner. Edward, might I inquire about something of a personal nature? He set down his wine glass. You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Fair enough. She hesitated. There is a portrait in the East Gallery, a beautiful woman with fair hair and blue eyes. The frame bears the name Lady Amelia Chambers. Was she your stepmother? His posture stiffened. She was. Mrs. Porter mentioned her. I gather she died 15 years ago. Why this sudden interest in my family history? His tone had cooled considerably. I am your wife. Is it not natural to be curious about your family? His fingers tapped against the table, that restless gesture she now recognized as a sign of discomfort. Yes, Amelia was my stepmother. She died shortly after my father, when I was 23. It was unexpected. I'm sorry. Were you close? A strange expression crossed his face. Not in the way you imagine. Before she could inquire further, he changed the subject, asking about her plans for redecorating the morning room. Zephyra recognized the diversion but did not press. Whatever history existed with his stepmother clearly remained a sensitive topic. Later that evening, as Zephyra prepared for bed, a knock sounded at the connecting door. She tightened the sash of her dressing gown. Come in. Edward entered, wearing a dark dressing gown over his nightclothes. He seemed tense, his movements less fluid than usual. I apologize for disturbing you at this hour, he said formally. It's quite all right. He stood awkwardly just inside the doorway. I have been remiss in my duties as a husband. Her heart quickened. Oh. 3 weeks have passed since our wedding. People will begin to question the validity of our union if... He cleared his throat. If there is no evidence of consummation. The clinical approach to intimacy should have offended her, yet Zephyra found herself appreciating his directness. How much worse to pretend romantic feelings neither possessed. I understand, she said quietly. And I am prepared to fulfill my part of our agreement. He nodded stiffly. Then, if you are amenable, I would suggest we proceed now. Unless you would prefer to delay further. Zephyra studied him, this proud, damaged man who approached physical intimacy as he might a business negotiation. There was something both sad and strangely touching in his formality. I am amenable, she said softly, though I confess to some nervousness. His expression softened slightly. As do I. It has been a very long time. The admission of vulnerability surprised her. She moved closer, close enough to catch the clean scent of his skin. Perhaps we might be nervous together, then. He reached out, his hand finding her shoulder with unexpected accuracy. You need not fear me, Zephyra. I will be gentle. I know, she whispered, and realized she did know, trusted this man she had married for security would never willfully hurt her. His fingers traced up to her face, mapping her features with delicate precision. I wish I could see you, he murmured. Is that a terrible thing to admit? No, she whispered. It seems a natural wish. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and Zephyra felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. Shall we move to my chambers? He asked. Or would you prefer to remain here? Here, I think. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. He nodded, his hand dropping to find hers. Will you allow me to touch you? To learn you by touch as I cannot by sight. Something in his words, their honesty, their vulnerability, moved her. Yes. What followed was unlike anything Zephyra had imagined. Edward approached her body with reverent hands, learning her contours with gentle exploration. He was methodical yet tender, pausing whenever she tensed, proceeding only with her whispered assent. When they finally joined, the physical discomfort was brief and far outweighed by the strange intimacy of the moment. Edward moved with careful restraint, his face above hers intent and focused, as if committing every sensation to memory. Afterward, he lay beside her, maintaining a small, respectful distance. Are you well? He asked, his voice low in the darkness. Yes, she answered truthfully. It was not what I expected. I hope not unpleasantly so. No. She turned to study his profile. Not unpleasant at all. He seemed to relax at her assurance. I should return to my chambers. Something like disappointment flickered through her. If you wish. He hesitated. Unless you would prefer I stay. The question hung between them, an unexpected divergence from their carefully negotiated arrangement. I think I would, she admitted, surprising herself. A slight smile touched his lips. Then I shall stay. As Zephyra drifted toward sleep, she found herself acutely aware of his presence beside her, this man who was her husband yet still largely a stranger. Something had shifted between them tonight, some small breach in the walls each had built for protection. It wasn't love, she had long ago surrendered that dream. But perhaps it was the beginning of something else, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and, yes, a measure of kindness. The weeks that followed saw subtle changes in their relationship. Edward began seeking her company beyond their evening meals, inviting her to join him for afternoon walks around the estate or to sit with him in the library while he worked. Their physical relationship developed a similar quiet rhythm, not passionate, perhaps, but increasingly comfortable and, at times, genuinely pleasurable. Yet whenever Zephyra attempted to learn more about his past, particularly about his stepmother or the circumstances of his accident, Edward withdrew behind a wall of formal politeness. The mystery of Lady Amelia and her connection to Edward's blindness became an unspoken barrier between them. One afternoon, nearly 3 months after their wedding, Zephyra was organizing a rarely used sitting room when she discovered a small wooden box tucked inside a cabinet. Inside lay a collection of newspaper clippings, yellowed with age. The headlines immediately caught her attention: mysterious death at Thornfield, Lady Chambers found at bottom of ravine, accident or foul play. Questions surround Duchess's death, there to Halewood dukedom questioned in stepmother's death. Her hands trembled as she read the articles. According to the reports, Lady Amelia Chambers had been found dead at the bottom of a ravine on the estate, her body discovered by a groundskeeper. Initial rumors of foul play had circulated, with suspicion falling briefly on her stepson, Edward, with whom she reportedly had a complicated relationship. The coroner ultimately ruled the death accidental, but the articles hinted at lingering doubts. "I see you've been exploring." Zephyra started violently, the box slipping from her hands. Edward stood in the doorway, his expression cold. "Edward! I didn't hear you, clearly." He stepped into the room, navigating with his usual precision. "Find anything of interest?" The chill in his voice made her shiver. "I was merely organizing, do not lie to me," he interrupted. "I can hear the papers in your hands. You found the articles about Amelia." Shame and defiance warred within her. "Yes. I apologize for the intrusion, but your curiosity outweighed your respect for my privacy." His voice was flat. "These were hardly hidden in a locked drawer, Edward. They were in a cabinet in a common sitting room. A room unused for years. A room in my home," she countered, finding her courage. "I am your wife, yet you keep significant parts of your past hidden from me." He laughed bitterly. "We entered a business arrangement, Zephyra. Not a confession." His dismissal stung more than it should have. "Is that all our marriage is to you? Still merely a business arrangement?" Something flashed across his face, regret, perhaps, before his expression hardened again. "It is what we agreed upon. Security for you, an heir for me. Not emotional entanglement." Zephyra rose, clutching the newspaper clippings. "Then as a business partner, I deserve to know if there are potential complications to our arrangement. Were you involved in your stepmother's death?" The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Edward went very still, his face draining of color. "How dare you?" he whispered. "Edward, I didn't mean, get out." His voice was deadly quiet. "Please, let me explain, get out," he roared, sweeping his arm across a nearby table, sending ornaments crashing to the floor. Zephyra fled, tears blurring her vision. She ran to her chambers and collapsed on the bed, shaking with the force of her sobs. How had she been so foolish? To accuse him, even by implication, of such a terrible crime? Hours later, Mrs. Porter knocked at her door, her expression grave. "His Grace has gone to the North Hunting Lodge. He instructed me to inform you he will remain there indefinitely." The words fell like stones. "Did he say anything else?" The housekeeper's gaze held a mixture of satisfaction and pity. "Only that you are free to use the house and grounds as you see fit in his absence. He has left instructions with Mr. Collins regarding your allowance." After Mrs. Porter departed, Zephyra sat motionless by the window, watching darkness fall over Thornfield's grounds. In a few careless moments, she had shattered the fragile connection forming between them. Worse, she had hurt a man who had shown her nothing but fairness and respect, however reserved his manner. That night, she slept in the chair by the window, unwilling to lie in the bed they had shared. By morning, she had made her decision. She would go to the hunting lodge and apologize. If he rejected her apology, so be it. But she would not allow their marriage to fracture without attempting to repair it. The North Hunting Lodge lay 5 miles from the main house, a sturdy stone building nestled against dense woodland. Zephyra rode alone, having dismissed the groom's offer to accompany her. This conversation required privacy. Edward must have heard the approach of her horse, for he stood in the doorway as she dismounted. His face was haggard, as though he had slept no better than she. "What are you doing here?" His tone was not encouraging. "I've come to apologize," she said simply. "There's no need. You merely spoke your mind." "I spoke thoughtlessly and cruelly, implying something I don't actually believe." She moved closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw. "I don't believe you capable of harming anyone, Edward." I was frustrated by your secrecy and spoke in anger. He remained silent, his sightless eyes directed somewhere past her shoulder. "I understand if you cannot forgive me," she continued. "But I needed you to know that I regret my words and the pain they caused you." When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "Do you know what happened the day Amelia died?" Zephyra held her breath. "No." "We argued. Violently. She had been my father's second wife, 15 years his junior. After his death, she made certain advances toward me that I rejected. She didn't take the rejection well." Zephyra's heart pounded. "Edward, the day she died, she threatened to spread rumors that I had been the one pursuing her. That I had made improper advances toward my father's widow." His laugh held no humor. The irony being that while the Ton would have condemned such behavior publicly, many would have privately considered it natural. A young man, his father's beautiful young widow. "What happened?" "I left her at the house and went riding to clear my head. When I returned, the servants were in an uproar. Amelia had gone walking near Thornfield Ravine and fallen to her death." His hands clenched into fists. "There were rumors, of course. Whispers that I had pushed her. The local magistrate questioned me, but ultimately ruled it an accident." "But you've carried the guilt all these years," Zephyra said softly. "As if you caused her death." "Didn't I?" "If I hadn't argued with her, if I had handled the situation differently. You cannot hold yourself responsible for her actions or her accident." He shook his head. 3 years later, I lost my sight in a hunting accident. Many called it divine justice. That's monstrous. Is it? I sometimes wonder if they were right. If my blindness was punishment for my role in Amelia's death. Zephyra moved closer, taking his hand. "Edward, look at me." "Well, listen to me, then. You were not responsible for your stepmother's death. And your blindness was not divine punishment. It was an accident, a terrible twist of fate." His fingers tightened around hers. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I know you," she said simply. "These months together have shown me your character. You are honorable, thoughtful, considerate. Not a man who harbors murderous thoughts, much less acts on them." Something in his posture eased slightly. "I should have told you the story myself, not left you to discover it through old gossip rags. And I should have asked you directly instead of snooping like a suspicious housemaid." She squeezed his hand. "Can we agree that we have both made mistakes?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "A reasonable assessment." "Will you come home?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "You still wish for me to return?" "After learning of the scandal attached to my name." The question revealed a vulnerability she had not expected. "Edward, I am the daughter of a convicted forger. Scandal is hardly unfamiliar territory." This drew a genuine laugh from him, the first she had heard. The sound transformed his face, softening the severe lines and making him appear years younger. "We are quite the pair, aren't we?" he said. "Indeed we are." She stepped closer. "Come home, Edward. please." He raised his hand, finding her cheek with unerring accuracy. "On one condition." "Which is?" "No more secrets between us. You may ask me anything, and I shall endeavor to answer honestly, however difficult." "I would like that very much." His fingers traced her features gently. "I have missed you," he admitted quietly. "More than I expected to." The simple confession warmed her more than any elaborate declaration might have. "I've missed you too." That evening, when they returned to Thornfield together, something fundamental had shifted between them. As Edward took her hand to help her dismount, a gesture more symbolic than practical given his blindness, Zephyra realized that their marriage had evolved beyond its transactional beginnings. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something equally precious: trust, freely given and genuinely earned. Spring arrived at Thornfield, transforming the austere landscape with vibrant color. The gardens Zephyra had carefully planned during the winter months burst into bloom, filling the air with sweet fragrance that drifted through open windows. For months had passed since their reconciliation at the hunting lodge, months that had seen their relationship deepen in ways neither had anticipated. They had established comfortable routines: breakfast together in the morning room, afternoons often spent in shared pursuits, evenings in the library where Zephyra would read aloud from books Edward selected. Their physical relationship had evolved similarly, moving from formal arrangements to genuine affection. Edward now sought her touch not merely for procreation but for comfort and pleasure, learning her body with increasing confidence while revealing a tenderness that sometimes left her breathless. One April morning, Zephyra sat in the garden, cataloguing the spring blooms for Edward's benefit, describing their colors and arrangement so he might seed them through her words. He listened intently, his face turned toward her voice, a slight smile playing at his lips. "You've transformed this place," he said when she paused. "I can hear the difference in the birds that have returned, smell the flowers where before there was only damp earth." "I merely instructed the gardeners to restore what was already here," she demurred. "No. You've brought life back to Thornfield." His hand found hers on the bench between them. "And not only to the gardens." The simple acknowledgement warmed her. "I've been happy here," she admitted. "Happier than I expected to be." Before he could respond, Mrs. Porter approached, her expression pinched. "Pardon the interruption, Your Grace, but there is a visitor." Something in her tone alerted Zephyra. "Who is it?" "A Mr. Richard Chambers." "His Grace's brother," Mrs. Porter added unnecessarily. "He arrived unannounced and is waiting in the main drawing room." Edward's face hardened. "Tell him I'm indisposed." "I already informed him you were at home, Your Grace." He was most insistent. Edward sighed heavily. "Very well. We shall receive him." As they walked back to the house, Zephyra sensed his tension. "You've never mentioned your brother visits." "Because he doesn't." "Not in 7 years." Edward's voice was tight. "Richard's appearance now is unlikely to herald anything pleasant." Richard Chambers proved to be Edward's physical opposite, slender where Edward was broad-shouldered, fair where Edward was dark. But his most striking feature was his eyes, the same pale blue as his brother's, yet cold and assessing where Edward's, even sightless, conveyed warmth. "Edward! How touching to find you enjoying the spring air." Richard's voice dripped with false conviviality. His gaze slid to Zephyra, examining her with unconcealed curiosity. "And this must be the mysterious bride we've heard whispers about. How delightful to finally meet my new sister." "Richard," Edward acknowledged coolly. "You might have sent word of your visit." "And risk you finding some excuse to avoid me?" "I think not." Richard moved about the room with the casual entitlement of someone who considered himself rightfully at home. Besides, I was overcome with curiosity about the woman who succeeded where so many failed, capturing the elusive blind duke. Zephyra lifted her chin. I assure you, sir, there was no capture involved. No? Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. How refreshingly direct. Tell me, my dear new sister, what attracted you to my reclusive brother? His title? His fortune? Or perhaps his convenient disability? Edward took a step forward, his face tight with anger. You go too far, Richard. Do I? I merely echo what all of London is saying. He turned back to Zephyra. They're quite fascinated by you, you know. The forger's daughter who became a duchess. Some admire your ambition. Zephyra felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her composure. I find I care very little for London's opinion, Mr. Chambers. Just as well. He picked up a small ornament from a side table, examining it carelessly. Though I confess I'm curious how you managed to convince my brother to marry you. He rejected every suitable candidate I presented over the years. Perhaps because I presented myself honestly, without agenda, Zephyra replied evenly. Now, might I ask the purpose of your unexpected visit? Surely not merely to satisfy your curiosity about me. Richard's eyebrows rose. Sharp-tongued as well as ambitious. Fascinating. He set down the ornament. Very well. I came to deliver news and an invitation. News first, your former guardian, Lady Huxley, has been spreading rather unpleasant rumors about your immoral character prior to your marriage. Zephyra tensed. What sort of rumors? The usual tedious allegations, impropriety with her husband or son, theft of family jewels, that sort of thing. Nothing particularly creative, but damaging nonetheless. He shrugged. Of course, now that you're a duchess, such rumors would normally slide off like water from oiled cloth. But given your father's history and the unusual circumstances of your marriage. Are you threatening my wife, Richard? Edward's voice was dangerously quiet. Threatening? Good heavens, no. Warning, perhaps. Richard smiled thinly. Which brings me to the invitation. The Duchess of Carmarthen is holding her annual spring ball next week. All of society will be there, including several of your former peers from the House of Lords who have expressed interest in meeting your mysterious bride. Edward's jaw tightened. You know I don't attend social functions. Yes, and that worked perfectly well when you were merely a reclusive bachelor. But now you're a married man, and your continued absence from society, combined with the mysterious nature of your marriage, is feeding precisely the sort of speculation you abhor. Richard's tone turned serious. Edward, I say this as your brother, appear at this one event, present your wife formally to society, and the rumors will lose their power. Continue hiding away, and those rumors will only grow more malignant. The logic, however manipulatively presented, was sound. Zephyra glanced at Edward, whose face had become a rigid mask. We shall consider your invitation, she said when Edward remained silent. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have matters to attend to. Richard looked surprised by her dismissal but recovered quickly. Of course. I shall leave you to your deliberations. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, one final matter. I've taken a house in the village for the fortnight. Do let me know your decision about the ball by tomorrow. The Duchess will need time to prepare for such distinguished guests. After he departed, Edward stood motionless, tension radiating from him. He enjoyed that, he said finally, delivering his little ultimatum wrapped in concern. Zephyra touched his arm gently. Perhaps, but that doesn't mean he's wrong. If Lady Huxley is indeed spreading rumors, I don't give a damn what Lady Huxley or anyone else says, Edward interrupted fiercely. Let them gossip. It changes nothing. It changes how people perceive us, Zephyra countered gently. And while I might share your disregard for society's opinion, I won't have your name tarnished because of me. Edward turned toward her, his expression softening. Zephyra, I have no intention of parading you before society like some prize to be evaluated. The tongue can be merciless, especially to those they consider outsiders. I'm not afraid of their judgment. Perhaps you should be. His voice was tight with suppressed emotion. They will scrutinize everything, your speech, your dress, your manner. They will watch how I navigate spaces, hoping to witness some embarrassing mishap. They will speculate about our marriage, our private moments. And they will do it all with smiles on their faces while slipping knives between your ribs. She took his hands in hers. Edward, look at me, listen to me. I have faced society's judgment my entire adult life. When my father was convicted, former friends crossed the street to avoid me. When I sought employment, doors were closed in my face. I am no stranger to cruelty disguised as propriety. This is different. Yes, because now I face them not as a disgraced governess, but as the Duchess of Halewood. With you beside me. She squeezed his hands. We need appear only this once. Show them we have nothing to hide, nothing to be ashamed of. Then we can return to Thornfield and our life here. Edward was quiet for a long moment. You truly wish to attend this ball? I wish to silence the rumors that threaten our peace. If attending one ball accomplishes that, then yes. He sighed deeply. Very well. We shall accept Richard's invitation. But promise me something. Anything. If at any point you wish to leave, if the scrutiny becomes too much, you'll tell me immediately. She reached up to touch his cheek. I promise. As she prepared for bed that night, Zephyra fought to suppress her anxiety. She had projected confidence for Edward's benefit, but the truth was far more complicated. The thought of facing London society, of being judged by people who had never known want or shame, terrified her. Yet she would endure it, for him and for the peace they had built together. Edward joined her later than usual, having spent hours in his study arranging details for their journey to London. As he slipped into bed beside her, he reached for her with unusual urgency, pulling her against him. Are you certain about this? He murmured against her hair. We could refuse Richard, remain here. And let Lady Huxley's rumors stand unchallenged? Let society believe you married some scheming adventuress. She shook her head. No. We face this together. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, we do. They had arrived in London 3 days earlier, immediately besieged by invitations, some genuine, others clearly motivated by curiosity. Richard had arranged for a dressmaker to visit, ensuring Zephyra would be appropriately attired. The result was a gown of deep sapphire silk that complemented her dark hair and pale skin perfectly. You look beautiful, Edward had said as her maid made final adjustments. Or so Mrs. Porter assures me, though I need no confirmation to know it's true. Now, as their carriage joined the queue approaching the mansion, Zephyra touched the sapphire pendant at her throat, Edward's gift, presented that morning. Something to match your gown, he had said, placing the velvet box in her hands. And to remind you that regardless of what happens tonight, you return home as my Duchess. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door, and Edward's valet assisted him to descend first, then offer his arm to Zephyra. They ascended the steps together, Edward navigating with practiced confidence, his hand resting lightly on Zephyra's arm for guidance. The announcement of their arrival created a ripple of silence through the ballroom. His Grace, the Duke of Halewood, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Halewood. All eyes turned toward them. Zephyra felt the weight of hundreds of stares, heard the whispers begin immediately. Edward's grip on her arm tightened fractionally. "Heads high," he murmured. "Remember who you are." Their hostess, the Duchess of Carmarthen, approached with practiced grace. "Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure. It has been far too long since you graced London with your presence." Her gaze slid to Zephyra, assessing and calculating. "And this must be your bride. How refreshing to welcome new blood into our circle." "Lady Carmarthen," Edward acknowledged with a slight bow. "May I present my wife, Zephyra?" Zephyra curtsied perfectly. "Your Grace. What a magnificent home you have." "How kind of you to notice," the Duchess replied with a thin smile. "Though I imagine any home must seem magnificent after. What were you before?" "A governess, wasn't it?" Edward stiffened beside her, but Zephyra maintained her composure. "Indeed, Your Grace. My experience has taught me to appreciate beauty in all its forms, whether in grand mansions or in the simple kindness of genuine welcome." The Duchess's smile froze slightly. "How philosophical. Do enjoy the evening." As she moved away to greet other guests, Edward leaned close to Zephyra. "Well done," he whispered. "The evening has only begun," she replied under her breath. What followed was a gauntlet of introductions, each interaction a carefully choreographed dance of social politics. Some peers were openly curious, others coolly polite. Ladies examined Zephyra's gown and jewels with calculating eyes, while gentlemen evaluated her appearance with varying degrees of discretion. Edward navigated the space with remarkable confidence, occasionally using Zephyra's arm for guidance but otherwise moving independently. She noticed how some watched him with morbid fascination, clearly hoping to witness some embarrassing mishap. "The Duke seems remarkably capable, despite his affliction," observed one countess to another, just loudly enough to be overheard. "Yes, though one wonders about his capabilities in other areas," her companion replied with a significant look toward Zephyra. Perhaps his young bride sought security rather than satisfaction. Heat rushed to Zephyra's cheeks, but Edward squeezed her hand in warning. "Ignore them," he murmured. "Their words reveal more about their own small minds than about us." Richard appeared at their side, looking smugly pleased with the stir their arrival had created. "Well, brother, your appearance has certainly set tongues wagging. Though I must say, your Duchess is acquitting herself admirably. One would hardly know she was raised in humbler circumstances." Before Edward could respond, a new voice interrupted. "There she is, the little schemer who wormed her way into my household only to steal my son's affections." Zephyra turned to find Lady Huxley bearing down on them, her face flushed with wine and indignation. The crowd parted, eager for the spectacle. "Lady Huxley," Zephyra acknowledged coolly. "What an unexpected surprise." "Unexpected?" "Ha! You knew I would be here, and knew I would expose your true character to all of society." Lady Huxley turned to the gathering crowd. "This woman, this so-called Duchess, attempted to seduce my son while employed as governess to my daughters." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Edward's face had gone rigid. "Lady Huxley," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you forget yourself." "Do I? Did your bride tell you how she was dismissed from my household for inappropriate behavior? How she shamelessly pursued a match with my son, using her feminine wiles to cloud his judgment?" Zephyra felt the room spinning around her. The accusation was so absurd, so contrary to the truth, that for a moment she couldn't find words to refute it. Edward stepped forward, his blind gaze somehow finding Lady Huxley with unerring accuracy. "Madam, you have just publicly slandered the Duchess of Halewood. I suggest you retract your statement immediately, or face the consequences." Lady Huxley faltered slightly at his commanding tone but rallied. "I speak only truth. Ask her if she denies being alone with my son on multiple occasions." "I do deny it," Zephyra said, finding her voice at last. "And I find it curious that you dismiss me with a letter citing my father's disgrace as the sole reason, yet now fabricate this salacious tale." "A letter I have preserved," Edward added calmly, "which makes no mention of any impropriety on my wife's part. A letter that will feature prominently in the slander suit my solicitors will file tomorrow morning, should you persist in these false allegations." Lady Huxley blanched. "You wouldn't dare." "I assure you, madam, there is very little I wouldn't dare to protect my wife's honor." Edward's voice remained level, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. "Now, you have a choice. Retract your statement and offer a public apology, or prepare to defend yourself in court." The assembled crowd watched in tense silence. Lady Huxley looked from Edward to Zephyra, then to the avid faces surrounding them. "I may have spoken hastily," she said finally, her voice strained. "The circumstances of her Grace's departure from my household may have been misremembered." "A complete retraction and apology, if you please," Edward insisted. Lady Huxley's face contorted with suppressed rage. "I apologize for any misunderstanding. I withdraw my earlier comments." Edward nodded once. "We accept your apology, though we shall not forget the intent behind your words. Come, Zephyra. I believe we have fulfilled our social obligations for the evening." As they moved toward the exit, the crowd parted silently. Zephyra kept her head high, though her knees threatened to buckle. She felt Edward's hand steady on her arm, drawing strength from his unwavering support. Richard appeared beside them as they reached the entrance hall. "That was unexpected." "Was it?" Edward's voice was cold. "You knew of Lady Huxley's allegations when you insisted we attend tonight." Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I thought it better to confront such rumors directly rather than allow them to fester." "How considerate," Edward replied dryly. "Our carriage, if you please." As they waited for their carriage to be brought around, Zephyra leaned close to Edward. "Thank you," she whispered. He turned toward her, his expression softening. "For what?" "For believing in me. For defending me." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Always." The ride back to their townhouse passed in silence, Zephyra too emotionally drained to speak. Once inside, Edward dismissed the servants and led her to the drawing room, where a fire burned welcomingly. "Are you well?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "It was worse than I anticipated. I'm sorry. I should never have agreed to attend." She shook her head, though he couldn't see the gesture. "No. It was necessary. Better to confront Lady Huxley's lies directly than allow them to spread unchallenged." Edward moved to the sideboard and poured 2 glasses of brandy with practiced ease. He handed one to Zephyra, his fingers brushing hers. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "Many would have crumbled under such an attack, yet you stood firm." She took a sip of brandy, welcoming its warmth. "I had you beside me." "You would have been just as strong without me," he countered. "It's who you are, Zephyra. It's why He stopped abruptly. "Why you what?" He set down his glass, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "It's why I find myself falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Zephyra stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Edward, I know it wasn't part of our arrangement," he continued, his voice low and intense. We agreed to a practical partnership without emotional entanglement. But somewhere along the way, between your honesty and your kindness and your extraordinary courage, I found myself loving you. Tears filled her eyes. Edward, you need not respond in kind, he interrupted. I expect nothing. I simply couldn't continue without telling you the truth. After tonight, watching you face society's cruelty with such dignity, she silenced him by taking his face between her hands. Edward, listen to me. Our arrangement began as a practical solution to mutual problems. But it has become so much more, at least for me. His hands covered hers, his expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. Zephyra? I love you, she whispered. I think I have for some time, though I was afraid to acknowledge it. Afraid you wouldn't welcome such feelings. Afraid. He laughed softly, incredulously. I thought my growing affection for you would be unwelcome, a complication to our carefully negotiated terms. Terms that have evolved considerably, wouldn't you say? Indeed they have. His hands moved to her waist, drawing her closer. Perhaps we should renegotiate. What terms did you have in mind? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That our marriage be based not merely on pragmatism but on the love we have found. That we face whatever comes, society's judgment, Richard's machinations, life's challenges, together, as equal partners. That we return to Thornfield and build a life filled with the happiness neither of us expected to find. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Those terms are acceptable. His smile was radiant. Then we have an agreement. When he kissed her, Zephyra knew with absolute certainty that she had found something far more precious than the security she had initially sought. In this man, proud, honorable, and unexpectedly tender, she had found not only a husband but a partner, a friend, and a love she had long ago stopped believing possible. Epilogue. 1 year later, Thornfield Hall stood transformed in the summer sunshine, its stone facade softened by climbing roses, its windows open to catch the gentle breeze. In the garden, Zephyra sat on a blanket spread upon the lawn, watching as Edward knelt beside her, his hands gently exploring the features of their 3-month-old son. He has your chin, Edward said, his fingers tracing the baby's face with delicate precision. And your spirit, I think. He fusses only when ignored. Zephyra laughed. A trait he shares with his father. Edward smiled, the expression transforming his once severe features. Perhaps. Though he has my impatience and your determination, a formidable combination. Little James Edward Chambers gurgled contentedly as his father's fingers tickled his stomach, tiny hands reaching up to grasp Edward's thumb with surprising strength. He's strong, Edward observed proudly. Like his father, Zephyra replied, leaning against Edward's shoulder. The past year had brought changes neither could have anticipated when they entered their practical arrangement. After the confrontation with Lady Huxley, they had returned to Thornfield, relieved to leave London's scrutiny behind. The expected scandal had flared briefly, then faded when more interesting subjects captured society's attention. Richard had retreated, thwarted in whatever scheme he had planned, though Edward remained vigilant, suspecting his brother would eventually make another attempt to undermine them. The most significant change, however, had been within their marriage itself. The admission of love that night in London had transformed their relationship, deepening their connection in ways both profound and mundane. Edward still maintained his independence fiercely, but now accepted Zephyra's assistance without resentment, recognizing it as partnership rather than pity. And when their son was born, a healthy, robust boy whose cries filled Thornfield with new life, Edward had held him with trembling hands, tears tracking silently down his face. I never thought I would know this joy, he had whispered. Never dared hope for it. Now, as they sat together in the garden, Zephyra marveled at how far they had come from that first meeting in Claiborne's office. From a business arrangement born of mutual desperation to a love that had healed them both. "What are you thinking?" Edward asked, sensing her contemplation. "About how strangely life unfolds," she replied. "How the thing we believe is our greatest misfortune can lead us to our greatest happiness." He nodded, understanding immediately. "Your father's disgrace. My blindness. Both led us here, to this moment." She touched his face gently. "I would endure it all again to reach this place with you." Edward smiled, turning to kiss her palm. "As would I. Every moment of darkness was worth it for the light you brought into my life." As their son dozed between them, Zephyra reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a practical arrangement between two wounded souls to a genuine partnership built on love, trust, and mutual respect. Love had not been part of their original agreement. But as with all well-negotiated contracts, the final terms had proven far more beneficial than either party could have initially imagined.